Well, we think that Asia markets are attractive relative to those in the West. Fundamentally, the shares are trading at about a 40% discount to those in the U.S., and Asia on the whole appears to be handling some of the difficult issues around COVID much better than those countries in Europe and also the U.S. as well. So I think ahead of the U.S. election, you're going to have a lot of uncertainty. Asia could well be a safe haven.
Yeah, you mentioned that it could be a safe haven. Where in particular?
Okay, so I think one of the things that we've been looking at right now is dividends. And as you see money being pumped into the financial system, that's putting pressure on bond yields. And bond yields are now yielding sub-zero in some markets, and a lot of investors do need to generate income. Now, historically, they have tended to go for US or European names to fulfill that in the equity space. The issue we've got in countries like the UK is that half or more than half of companies are having to cut dividends because of difficult trading circumstances surrounding COVID. So for that reason, if you need to generate income from an equity exposure, your best bet, in our view, is in Asia. And in particular, we'd identify North Asia, so Korea, Taiwan, China, but specifically Japan.
What did you make of the China data out today when it comes to the economic recovery that we are seeing on the mainland?
Well, the data that we think is quite interesting is perhaps a little bit more company-specific. And I read something this morning about Daimler, which had its AGM in Germany yesterday, and it pointed to the fact that during the second quarter of this year, China Mercedes sales were the best it's ever had. Now, clearly, second quarter probably includes some delayed purchases from the first quarter, but the fact that that number is up more than 20% on the consecutive quarter, I think is quite encouraging.
Hey, Jim, it's Hadley out in Turkey. I want to ask you about what's happening with regards to your strategy as a result of how quickly we're getting toward November 4th. I mean, a Biden presidency could potentially raise corporate taxes, but at the same point, I mean, we've already seen his team discussing quite lively about how they're going to change their strategy here in the Middle East. What about their strategy in Asia? Could we see a difference when it comes to the U.S.-China trade talks and thereby a difference when it comes to Asian equities?
I think we could. There's a number of things we could look at with regard to Asia and the U.S. One is the security pact. So, for example, both Japan and Korea are client states of the U.S. The U.S. has big commitments in terms of military personnel in both of those geographies. So that's going to be something which will be tested in the first months of any new presidency were it to exist. But I think the other point to make on trade is that China is a very good opportunity for Trump to deflect attention away from domestic issues. Now, we've had this in the U.S. in the 1980s when it came to the Reagan administration and Japan. It was known as Japan bashing in those days. But China bashing now is quite routine to, as I say, deflect from the domestic agenda. So I think one thing which will be considered as soon as we had a change in government, if that were to happen, is how will the new U.S. government engage with China, and one would expect it would be more constructive than what we've had in the last, let's say, 12 to 24 months.
Before we let you go, what do you think it changes the game when it comes to the conversation about Hong Kong?
Okay, so I think in terms of Hong Kong, I mean, the fundamentals we see are actually improving from a stock market and an economic point of view. I mean, one thing we would draw attention to is that there's a new housing development which is opening up in a place called Lohas Park, and that is a joint venture with Chung Kong Holdings, one of the big constituents here. And new home sales, they basically sold all of the units in one single day. So I think on the ground, people here in Hong Kong, one of the things that does concern them is the money in their pockets rather than some of the other issues surrounding democracy.